So good morning, everyone. You are, just to make sure, you are in the worker co-op breakout room, just to make sure that's where you think you are. And our speaker today is Robyn, and see if I'm saying this correctly, Robyn Zoccola.
Yes, that is right.
She's with Parr, Richey, Frandsen, Patterson, Kruse, LLP. She's an associate attorney and concentrates her practice in utility and business law. She's been involved in a variety of projects for the firm's cooperative clients and has enjoyed learning about the cooperative model throughout her time at the firm. So Robyn, it is all yours.
Great. Can everyone see the presentation? Can everyone see the screen?
I can see it, yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So thanks for being here today. Thanks, Deb, for that introduction. So if at any point I'm talking too fast, please let me know. I can slow down. But today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about worker-owned companies. And
joined us. Oh, Deb didn't join us. Oh, she's still there. That's good.
I just wanted to make sure that was recording over here too. So.
Yep. Chris. Okay, well let's go ahead and get started. So we're very fortunate today to have Fenton Strickland participate with us in our
to democratic decision making within the company. Worker cooperatives are usually going to be smaller businesses in the retail or service industries, but they're certainly not limited to that. These companies are generally small enough that each share is meaningful, but not so small that each share is too expensive. That being said, there are larger worker cooperatives. So the earliest worker cooperative ever recorded was in Scotland in 1761, but most modern worker cooperatives are modeled after the Mondragon Corporation in Basque Spain. The Mondragon Corporation is a worker cooperative in Spain, and it was founded in 1956 and is the 7th largest company in Spain. And they have around 80,000 employees that are spread across 95 cooperatives that are all governed democratically. And then those cooperatives are joined together in a functioning network that forms the corporation. And they believe that the cooperative business model is responsible, democratic, and sustainable. And so cooperatives tend to arise during times of social movement. During the 1920s, the United States had around 2,600 worker cooperatives, but most went bankrupt during the Great Depression. And during the 1960s, they began to emerge again, and most of the United States' largest cooperatives can be traced back to the 1970s and 80s. According to the Democracy at Work Institute with the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, there's currently between 900 to 1,000 worker cooperatives that employ 8,000 to 10,000 people in the United States. The median size of those worker cooperatives is 6 workers, with the average age being 5 years old. And the largest cooperative in the United States is Cooperative Home Care Associates in New York City, with almost 2,000 workers. It's important to note that not all of those employees are worker owners. Worker cooperatives are all unique and can vary from small businesses up to large 80,000 employee corporations like the Mondragon Corporation. So there's a lot of variety. So in the United States, worker cooperatives can form under a variety of corporate laws. Some states, not Indiana, but states like California and Texas, there's not very many, have laws specifically for cooperative corporations. And under that model, cooperative corporations' patronage dividends are exempt from federal corporate tax. And the individual would pay tax on patronage dividends, and Subchapter T of the Internal Revenue Code restricts the deductibility of the dividends based on the time they were made and what form they were made, how they were allocated, and limits. There's sometimes limits on the source of income. But Indiana does not have any laws specifically for worker cooperatives or cooperative corporations. So businesses in Indiana that want to operate as a worker cooperative need to be incorporated under different corporate laws. So one possible method of incorporation is as a limited liability company. State registration and filing requirements are going to be less than what's required for corporations. In Indiana, to be an LLC, only the articles of incorporation need to be filed with the state, and there's a filing fee. The biggest benefit of LLCs is that they enjoy limited liability. So individuals are not going to be personally liable, barring their own negligence, except for the amount of their original investment into the LLC. For example, if I invested $500 into a company to become a partial owner, I'd only lose that $500 if the company went bankrupt but still had outstanding debts, as long as I was not negligent. The governance structure of LLCs is flexible, so worker cooperatives can choose what governance structure is going to be most beneficial for them. Maybe they want a board of directors, maybe they'd rather operate by consensus. An LLC makes those choices available, and that choice can be designated in the operating agreement. So in an LLC that operates by consensus, each worker owner can bind the company, barring any restriction in the operating agreement. And that's something to consider, because your business may not want every worker owner to be able to bind the company to a contract, for example, and that's fine, but it does need to be laid out in the operating agreement.
Robyn,
yeah.
just one, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you're trying to, but your slides are not advancing.
Oh, okay.
We're still on the first slide.
Oh no. Let me stop the screen share. Can you see this slide now?
Yes.
All right, I'm not gonna put it in the main slideshow because that seems to have been causing a problem. So everyone can see this now? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Thank you guys for telling me that. Like I said, if an LLC operates by consensus, worker owners can bind the company. So if your business doesn't want every worker owner to be able to bind the company, designating that in the operating agreement is necessary. And then LLC worker owners do have to pay taxes on business income, and worker owners of LLCs are not presumed to be employees for employment law purposes. And we're going to discuss that a little bit later because that presumption can be overcome. So a cooperative could also be incorporated as a corporation. And corporations can be either an S corporation or a C corporation, and there's for-profit and nonprofit options. Both corporations provide their owners with limited liability, and they can issue multiple types of stock. And multiple types of stock provides an avenue for outsiders to invest in the company and receive a non-voting share, and that can help grow capital. C corporations can grow easily, whereas S corporations cannot have more than 100 owners without converting to another entity type. So most worker cooperatives, are small, and so that shouldn't be an issue, but larger worker cooperatives that are incorporated as an S corporation or want to have 100 owners should determine if amending their articles of incorporation would be best so that they can have more than 100 owners if they would like. And then C corporations are taxed twice. They're taxed at the entity level and when owners receive dividends. S corporations avoid that entity level taxation by passing through income to owners. C corporations can retain capital in the business without tax consequences, but S corporations have to pay taxes on business income, whether it's retained or distributed. So it can be a bit more difficult for S corporations to retain capital. Both have requirements around the election of board members, annual meetings, annual reports. So there is a little bit more administrative requirements for corporations than LLCs. And employment law is presumed to apply to worker owners under this model, so they must be treated as employees. And then worker cooperatives could also form as a general partnership. This is going to be a lot less common, because worker owners are personally liable for the debts of the company under this model. So if the company goes bankrupt, the worker owners would be personally liable for the satisfaction of those debts, which could leave them in financial ruin. There's no separate legal entity, so the cooperative cannot retain capital, and if the owners leave, the cooperative can't continue. General partnerships cannot receive outside investment, and so worker owners have to provide all of the capital. There is flexibility in the governance structure. There's minimal to no administrative requirements. There's no filing fee. There's no need to even file at all. There's also no double taxation, and employment law is presumed not to apply. But that biggest drawback is going to be the personal liability, because worker owners are unlikely to want to take that risk of being personally liable for the debts of the business. It would also be difficult to raise that capital because worker owners generally are going to lack the funding to provide all of the capital. All right, I'm advancing the slide, so can everyone see the next slide? All right.
Yes.
So the operation, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. The operation of a worker cooperative varies by the cooperative. So cooperatives in states with specific cooperative laws, like for cooperative corporations, they need to follow those laws. But cooperatives with the flexibility to determine their own governance structure, they may choose to have the worker owners elect a board of directors. The elected directors do not enjoy more voting rights or any more shares than do other worker owners. They still have one vote and equal share in the company. It's important to keep in mind that when converting, going this route can lead to an inexperienced board of directors because most existing employees are not going to have experience running a business. And this is why training and preparation are so important during the conversion process, which we're going to talk about a little later. So sometimes a worker cooperative may choose to operate by consensus. In this case, it's important that worker owners are cooperative and willing to compromise. It's going to work best with open, frequent, and clear communication and among smaller businesses with fewer worker owners. A cooperative that operates by consensus may choose to designate certain decisions to certain people with specific experience so that only major decisions need to be made by consensus. And that can all be outlined in the operating agreement, and it's a business decision. And again, if operating by consensus, worker owners are presumed to have the authority to bind the company. So if you don't want them to be able to bind the company, for example, to a contract, lay that out in the operating agreement, and an attorney can help with drafting that. So no matter what law a worker cooperative is incorporated under, they're still subject to employment and immigration laws. In many cases, worker owners need to be treated as employees, even though they are partial owners. So in many cases, they're going to be treated as owners and employees. Additionally, immigrant worker owners are going to most likely need to complete I-9s showing that they are authorized to work in the United States. If a worker cooperative is subject to and does not abide by employment and immigration laws, they could incur fines and penalties. But assuming that everyone shares equally in ownership and control of the company, worker owners in some entity types are not presumed to be employees for purposes of employment law. So all worker owners share equally in ownership. They have one share and one vote. But not all worker owners are necessarily going to have equal control. For example, if there's a board of directors, worker owners serving as directors will have more control than worker owners that don't. So worker cooperatives should work with an attorney to determine if they must treat their worker owners as employees under employment law, because that's going to come with other obligations. So there is another presentation going on right now about ESOPs. Really quickly, wanted to talk about the main differences. So while worker cooperatives and ESOPs both give ownership interest in the company to the employees, worker owners with worker cooperatives invest their own money into the company. And they have equal share and one vote each. But with ESOPs, the employer funds the employee's ownership interest. And some employees might prefer that, but it's not going to engage them in the company the same way putting their own money into the company might. An employee may feel like the money the company put into their share was never really theirs because they had no choice what to do with it. And so it may not motivate them to care about the success of the business in the same way they might as if they invested their own money. And ESOP shares are unequal and do not give voting rights, so the employee has no voice. Those are the main differences, but both are models of worker ownership, just a bit different. So why worker ownership? Why do companies convert to a worker ownership model? Perhaps worker ownership was always the goal. Maybe the owner wants to retire and has no successor. Maybe it's just a business decision going forward. No matter the reason for conversion, worker cooperatives have benefits for the company, its employees and worker owners, and they can benefit the community as well. So worker owners are more committed to the business's success. And this is because they've invested their own money. And when the business is more successful, they see more return on their investment. They're more loyal to the company for the same reason. And studies on worker cooperatives have found that worker cooperatives tend to be more productive. There are also benefits for worker owners. Worker cooperatives generally value their workers in ways that are different than many companies. For example, some worker cooperatives have decreased wages during times of economic stability instead of laying people off. No one wants decreased wages, but it does promote job stability, especially during times of economic hardship. Worker owners are also presented with this unique opportunity to own part of a business and share in the profits. They get to decide how to operate a business and dictate how they're treated. And most of these people would not have that opportunity otherwise. It can help generate wealth. That means some may have the opportunity to pull themselves out of poverty. It can give them valuable skills and knowledge that can help improve their quality of life. And so those benefits make worker owners feel valued. And then there's also benefits to the community. Worker cooperatives in general are going to be smaller businesses, so their employees tend to be local. And when worker owners share in the profits of the worker cooperative, they tend to spend that money within their own community. So the profits of the cooperative get reinvested into the community and promote economic development. So a company that's already in existence can choose to become a worker cooperative. A company wishing to convert may need to change their corporate identity. So a sole proprietorship, for example, would need to incorporate as an LLC, or a corporation, for example, maybe a general partnership. A company already incorporated may decide that the benefits of another designation will be better for their business going forward. And they can file an amendment to their articles of incorporation with the Indiana Secretary of State, and an attorney can help with that process and with determining what entity status could be most beneficial to help you meet your goals. But before making any changes, it's important to determine how, if a conversion proceeds, the business will go about the conversion. So some businesses that convert will keep the current owner on as a worker owner and have existing employees become worker owners. Other businesses convert and the owner retires and the existing employees become worker owners. And there are some benefits to making existing employees worker owners. The employees that are invited to become worker owners are going to be familiar with the business and have skills and experience with the industry, the clients, and the way the business has been run. But there's going to be some challenges. They're going to have to work at changing the workplace culture and dynamic because a change in the bylaws does not automatically mean that worker owners are now going to feel as if their opinion matters more than it did before. If the old owner stays on, there may be a perception that the old owner has more power. And to be successful, everyone needs to work together to overcome that. And another difficulty is the lack of experience that worker owners likely will have with running a business and making business decisions, which is why training and preparation are important. If existing employees are going to be offered the opportunity to become worker owners, there are some decisions that need to be made. Will there be a probationary period? How will worker owners be selected from existing employees? What will the qualifications be? Those are some things to think through, and it's not an exhaustive list. Sometimes businesses decide that it would be better to bring in new people to be the founding worker owners instead of current employees. When the owner brings in outsiders to be worker owners, they get to strategically choose individuals with the skills, knowledge, and experience that they think would be valuable to the business going forward. But these individuals are not going to have experience with the specific business that's transitioning to the worker cooperative. They won't have experience with their clients. There's not going to be those pre-existing relationships and knowledge of the company that existing employees have. So some companies may choose a hybrid approach and bring in some new people to be worker owners while also inviting some existing employees to be worker owners. And that can help circumvent the challenges of bringing in outsiders because some outsiders can be hand selected based on their skills and knowledge, but existing employees will have that experience with the clients, the industry, and how the business has been run, and they can work together to bring the conversion to completion. There can also be a hybrid of all of these. Maybe the existing owner is staying on as a worker owner. Some existing employees are invited to be worker owners, and an outsider comes in. All of this is up to the converting business as business decisions, but these are the main ways that other cooperatives have converted. So much of the conversion process does come down to business decisions, but the first step to converting to a worker cooperative is committing to the transition. These discussions need to be had, and all parties involved need to be committed to the conversion process. If some employees are going to become worker owners, they need to be involved in the transition process. One reason worker cooperatives fail is when employees are skeptical and are uninterested in the conversion. This may happen because employees don't know anything about the cooperative model because it's not super common or well known. It could be because they just aren't interested. But whatever it is, they need to be on board for a transition involving existing employees as worker owners to be successful. If current employees are not going to be worker owners, then the owners and management team need to be committed to rebuilding a new team that is committed to worker ownership. And the next, a participatory culture should be established. Transparency and participation are important to the conversion process and also to a functional cooperative. So this can include some elements of participatory management so that employees have opportunities to think as an owner. It could be as simple as encouraging employees to attend committee, team, or board meetings, maybe sending out weekly updates so employees are aware of what's going on at the management level, or even by keeping books open to the employees. There just needs to be that two-way, broad, open, and clear communication. So once preliminary discussions have happened, the company should then create a conversion team to lead transition efforts. The team should include the owner, management, and a small group of employees that are committed to the transition. One thing to consider that other cooperatives have done is creating a written commitment of interest form. Companies wishing to convert can use these as a way of gauging interest among their employees. They're not legally binding, but they can give the company an idea of how interested employees are in the transition process and who is interested. Interested employees can then help develop governance structures, draft bylaws, and do other important tasks that must be done before the transition is finalized. They can research the conversion process and lead the company through it by having discussions about the new governance and management structures. They can coordinate with lawyers and accountants about the changes that need to be made, and they can start getting involved already. And this could start, for example, as a research committee that presents its findings to the rest of the employees to have discussions and to get their input about converting. So it's equally important to get advising and training and support for owners and soon-to-be worker owners. To have a successful transition, soon-to-be worker owners need to understand how to run a worker cooperative. These trainings are most beneficial when they occur throughout the transition process and not only once the transition has been finalized. Putting the time, money, and effort up front into preparing everyone for the transition and what is to come before its completion can help everything go as smoothly as possible. Getting advice from attorneys about the governance and entity structure, bylaws, and other governing and legal documents is helpful, and CPAs can help value the company to determine what the company should be sold for. And while all of this is ongoing, financing needs to be obtained. Perhaps the owner wants to finance the conversion and is willing to be paid for the business over a term of years. Maybe they do this by making a loan to the business or guaranteeing loans from external lenders. More likely is going to be turning to external lenders for financing. A phased buyout, when possible, provides the least risk to the business and decreases the cost of external loans required. Additionally, if their entity structure allows for it, the cooperative may choose to issue non-voting shares to investors to help fund the transition and raise capital. There's just a variety of options, and each one needs to be weighed to determine what is best for the company. And then to determine how much financing is necessary, it's helpful to have a third-party financial valuation of the business. This is almost always going to be necessary if a bank or other external institution is lending the money. But this valuation can also protect the employees who are going to become worker owners because they're going to be taking on a financial commitment when buying into the business. And this helps protect their interests, especially because many would-be worker owners aren't going to have strong finance backgrounds. So this shows that you value your employees and their financial well-being. And then before finalization, the bylaws need to be amended. Any other company documents like the operating agreement should be amended. Once the transition is final, that training should continue and the success of the business should be monitored to keep the business strong and headed in the right direction as a cooperative. So it's important to know that not all businesses are ready to be worker cooperatives and not all businesses will be successful as a worker cooperative. Before starting the process, it's imperative that all are committed to the transition process and that the business is in good financial health. Converting to a worker cooperative is not going to save a failing business unless the reason for failing is tied directly to the departing owner and can be easily remedied. That's likely not going to be the case. So good relationships with suppliers lack of real life experience. So the cooperative will need to prepare to work through that. Finally, each conversion is unique. So you can't model your conversion after another and expect the exact same outcome. Prior successful cooperatives can provide guidance and models, but there's no guarantee that things will be the same. And that can be difficult to deal with. There are not many worker cooperatives in the United States, so there is no set way to convert, because so much of it does come down to business decisions. But there are a lot of great things about worker cooperatives. Employees are more committed to the business success because they've invested their own money into it. They're partially responsible for the success of the business because they have a voice and a vote. And all of that contributes to employee loyalty and productivity across the business, which in turn contributes to its success. They care more and want to see a return on their investment. Another benefit is that cooperatives can provide an option to owners looking to exit or retire with no successor, and those businesses can still thrive. So for example, if a family business has no successor due to lack of interest, or maybe there's no one else in the family line, the business can continue by allowing trusted employees to run the business by converting it to a cooperative. Allowing those existing employees to become worker owners emphasizes their importance to the company and speaks volumes about how valued their voices and opinions are. It's putting a type of trust in them that likely hasn't been placed in their hands before. And simply put, worker cooperatives create meaningful change. They generate wealth for employees by allowing them to profit off the success of business. And that can lead them to be more productive and care more about the company. With that extra money, they can reinvest that money back into the community. They can help their family. This leads to economic development within the community when they are able to spend that money in the community. And these are things that can make a real difference, not only in the lives of those working for the company, but those in the community as well. So in Indiana, there have been 2 worker cooperatives. Friends of the Third World is still active in Fort Wayne. It's incorporated as a nonprofit corporation and was founded in 1972, and they provide job training for those in need and sell products made by people in developing countries. The other corporation, Ocean's Editors, was an English manuscript editing business in Bloomington, and it's been dissolved. While Ocean's Editors is no longer around, Indiana businesses thinking about converting to a worker cooperative could reach out to Friends of the Third World to see if they'd be willing to discuss their experience as a worker-owned company. And then at the end of the day, converting to a worker cooperative is a business decision that requires outside counsel, such as lawyers and CPAs to complete, as well as a committed workforce to succeed. So if you feel your company is ready and would succeed as a worker cooperative, you can start planting those seeds now and having those discussions. Conversions can happen in as few as 3 months and can last over a year, just depending on what all needs to be done. Every conversion is unique, just as every company is unique. And so learning as much as possible is helpful to be prepared. So if anyone has any questions, I am available to answer them if I can. And if I don't have the answer, you can feel free to reach out to me at my email here on the screen, and I will get back with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Robyn. Are there any questions for Robyn? I do want to make one comment. So if you are interested in converting to a worker co-op, you can also reach out to me, and I can help you with that process or point you to other appropriate resources. I do have one question, Robyn. Would you talked about looking at the legal documents? So say that your business is set up as a sole proprietor, which a lot of smaller businesses would be. So would the business need to dissolve that and reincorporate as using one of the statutes in Indiana to become a worker co-op?
Yes, they would. They would need to incorporate as an LLC or as a corporation or a general partnership if they wanted to. That model is going to be less popular, but they do need to then incorporate as an LLC or a corporation just so they can have more owners than just the one. In a sole proprietorship, there's one owner.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Well, as long as I don't see any other questions in the chat, I do have another question. How important, and maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, how important is it to work with an attorney who has an understanding of co-ops as opposed to, just an attorney who has not ever worked with cooperatives before?
So I think it's important to speak with an attorney who has experience or is knowledgeable about co-ops. Like my firm has experience with a lot of membership cooperatives, but because there's not a lot of worker-owned cooperatives, there's not going to be a ton of attorneys in Indiana that have a lot of direct experience with worker cooperatives. But cooperatives in general are more, you're unique. There's different considerations that need to be considered when creating the bylaws, the operating agreement, that wouldn't necessarily be needed when just incorporating as a general business, an LLC, a corporation that doesn't have this kind of model. And so it is important to work with an attorney who knows about worker cooperatives and is knowledgeable about it, so that you can make sure that everything is laid out the way you want it to be able to make your business as successful as possible.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your presentation the importance of education. So in general, education is one of the underlying cooperative principles, but when you're converting from a single owner business to a business that's owned by multiple people, namely your employees, making sure that your employees understand the process, how it works, the whys and wherefores is incredibly important, so that you can bring those people along through the conversion process and making sure that they understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, exactly. Because if they don't understand, that could lead to that skepticism that could in turn just derail the entire conversion. They need to be on board, and they have to understand what's going on.
Other questions? We've got a few minutes yet. If you have anything that you would like to ask Robyn.
And if you think of anything later and don't have anything now, you can feel free to reach out to me at my email.
I have a quick question. Robyn, you talked about how some businesses will use bring in outside employees, or they use a sort of hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Can you just provide an example of what type of people they'd be bringing in? I know it's probably dependent upon the particular business, but yeah, if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So a lot of times when you're bringing on existing employees as worker owners, they won't have the business experience, the experience making those decisions. And so maybe you want to bring in somebody who wasn't with the company, who has that kind of experience, to be a worker owner. So maybe they can sit on the board of directors and they've had experience making business decisions, for example. And so bringing them in as somebody with that skills and experience that the existing employees who will be worker owners don't have, that could be a reason why a business might want to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then I think there's one more.
Yeah.
How much more complicated would it be to convert a consumer co-op to either a hybrid or a worker co-op? What do you mean by a hybrid co-op?
I'm wondering if Brad is talking about a multi-stakeholder.
Okay.
There it goes.
I don't think I'm, can you rephrase the question for me?
Brad, do you want to unmute and rephrase your question for Robyn?
If not, I think that, okay, consumer food co-op, interested how to convert to a hybrid worker consumer. So I'm not really sure. Are you saying that you're interested to convert, like, are you currently like a member food co-op where your consumers own? Okay. So I actually don't know the answer about combining a buyer and worker co-op. I do think it would be more complicated because there would be different considerations. It'd be combining, there's going to be different things in the bylaws and the operating agreement that go towards the buyer owners as opposed to the worker owners. And so I don't know that it's been done before. I haven't heard of that. I don't have no reason to think that it couldn't be done, but yeah, I don't know. I definitely think it would be more complicated, but I don't think it would be a ton more complicated. There just might be a few more steps.
If it's currently an existing food co-op and it's consumer owned, so the members are the buyers, at least this is what the work that I've done in the food co-op space. In order to bring on additional levels or categories of membership, which is what it sounds like you're talking about, bringing on workers as members or owners as well. I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robyn, that could be affected through changes to the bylaws.
Mm-hmm. I think it could be as well. There just you'd probably have different things you'd want to address in those bylaws and in the operating agreement to ensure that, because there's going to be different considerations for different types of owners, and so making sure all of those are addressed. But I think that would be the only different thing to consider, and the only difficulty. So a little more complicated, but probably not a ton.
Does that help, Brad? Yes, okay. Any other questions? Just one other comment in the food co-op space. There definitely is movement in that particular sector to look at doing more multi-stakeholder cooperatives, where from the very beginning, as the co-op is being organized, that workers are included in that membership class as well, instead of just the consumer. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. But there's definitely a movement in that arena. Any other last questions before we close out this session and go to break? Robyn, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing information about the conversion process. And if you have additional questions, I'll be sending out the slide deck so that you'll be able to reach out to Robyn with additional questions. I'm going to close this breakout session out. You'll be back into the general session, and then we'll take a break until 11 o'clock. Robyn, any last words?
No, just thank you, and feel free to reach out to me with any further questions. I appreciate your time.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
let's see.
Satisfied with the economic terms, of course, as well as certain legal terms. Generally speaking, and in almost any transaction, the sellers are going to have to stand behind, the trustee is going to insist.
For those of you who are still in the ESOP room, you can leave the room. If I close it down, I am afraid that I'll close the other one out as well. So you will actually be kicked out of this room in about a minute and a half. So you can either stay in here or go ahead and leave the room, and we'll see you back in the general session at 11.
These kinds of deals, and and trustees are increasingly, and this, it's been the trend for many years now, increasingly aware of the process and concerned about the process that's been followed to get all the way to a deal and closing a purchase of shares. And so the trustee, it's important the trustee is satisfied with that process and the record of the transaction that's been made in order to provide a good record for review by the DOL. And I know that my time is coming up, Rick, so I'll wrap this up in just a moment. And I'm glad to share slides or answer any questions later. Just something I want to say here at the end, I think is important, is after the deal. So often, I've seen it play out where you have your ESOP transaction, the company, and I had the slide in here, right here, the company has this brand new ESOP. It kind of reminds me of being and reminds me of when my first child was born, and my wife and me getting home and thinking, okay, what the heck are we supposed to do now? There was no operating manual, so and that's sort of like this brand new ESOP. There's this this new baby that, frankly, oftentimes the company, okay, was not real sure what to do then, but there are some things to pay close attention to, and that's something that legal counsel for the company should be helping them through these things, and the third-party administrator hired by the company should be helping them through these kind of things. But some things to be mindful of on the company side are, the transaction covenants. What do the deal documents say that the company has to do? Governance. There might have been some covenants within the transaction documents that affect corporate governance. So, does the board need to find candidates for an external board member to propose to the trustee for election to the board? Something that is added to a company's corporate governance is ESOP plan governance. So incorporating close attention to repurchase obligation and the operation of the ESOP into the company's regular corporate governance. Board of director meetings look different after an ESOP transaction, after the company has gone to ESOP, than they do before. And that's because the ESOP is front and center there with the company. And then the last thing, and I'll wrap it up here, is communication and education. So it's not unusual for the company to have a big rollout meeting with its employees to announce the ESOP and generate some excitement about it, and to start up that ownership culture there within the company. But then it's important that people become educated on the ESOP, and particularly the board, ESOP committee appointed by the board, and but also management employees who are going to be responsible for ESOP administration. Send them off to various conferences and so forth. Use resources from INCEO or the ESOP Association or Indiana Chapter of ESOP Association. Help them to become educated in operating the company with the ESOP in place. With that, I know I've gone way over here, Rick, but if there are any other questions, glad to field those. This screen has my contact information on it. Glad to hear from anybody if there's anything that they wanted to talk about more, or something that was even left out here that you feel like you'd like to chat about.
Thanks. Right now, we're on a break until 11. Are there any questions for Fenton before we leave? The one comment I would share is that, as Fenton talked about, I mean, there's a lot of paperwork to be able to set this up in terms of, setting up the plan, going through the transaction. It's just like any other sale of a business. There's some special uniqueness associated with it being an ESOP. But in the end, you're doing basically a transaction from one buyer to or one seller to a buyer. I think the difference in an ESOP is that once you set up that ESOP plan, and the decisions that you make to set it up in year one may not be the same decisions that you need as a mature ESOP. And you do need to make sure that you think about what the plan says, the maturity of the ESOP, the maturity of the company, and be willing to revisit that and go back and say, what, we need to make these changes. How do we make them? Because again, it's dealing with ERISA to make sure that you're not putting the plan in jeopardy. Correct, Fenton?
Yeah. Appreciate that, Rick, because that is not unusual at all. And as that distributions grow, repurchase obligation grows, and the company might want to revisit things like the distribution provisions in the plan. And I've seen it go the other way as well, where the dealt with this with a client recently who called and said, hey, I want to make a more meaningful benefit for employees, and they so they made changes to their plan to reduce the eligibility requirements. Yes. and reduce the amount of time that participants have to wait for distributions, and the and the installment periods and all that. So but yeah, something that they have to keep a close watch on, and always have your finger on whether the company's able to do it and do it well.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's not a one and done document. It's a living document because it's a trust. And it's really easy in the beginning to say, well, we're going to do this because it's what the law requires. And then you say, well, gosh, does it make sense to have someone wait a year to 18 months to be a member when we want them to act like an owner from day one? And all of a sudden they go back and they say, well, we want to have ownership from, on hire, or the same thing with distributions. In some cases it's cash, it's all cash at the beginning. We'll just pay you when you leave. And it's like, well, that made sense when the value of the stock was nil at the beginning, but now it's like $100 a share, and that's a lot of money to write checks for. So all of a sudden, like you said, they have to change the distribution policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other additional questions, on the bottom of your screen on the lower right, there should be a button in blue that says leave room. So if you
I have just one quick clarification, if you'll allow me. Sure. An ESOP basically, I mean, the end product is the end product, but really it seems like if the participants are willing to do the work to handle the relationships and to confront dealing with anticipating some of the complications that are going to be created later, if they're willing to do that work initially, this seems to be a product that allows that work to get done. And that ends up being what's able to roll forward. Whatever actually happens with the capital and so forth, the relationships are really established with the establishment of going through the process of getting the ESOP. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Remy, I think I agree with that. But something that will always be relevant to everything that you just described is going to be, all right, well, what do the code and ERISA permit the company to do later on too, so that you can't alienate any accrued or any vested benefit, and there are certain we talk about, all right, let's lengthen the distribution period and so forth. Well, you have to work within the defense that ERISA and the code provide. But I agree, and I think it's a good point that hey, the implementation of the ESOP itself and the extension of this benefit kind of has created this this company and employee or at least further solidified company employee compact there, and I think that one thing that's very important is the communication. If the company, ESOP companies that are highly capable of managing expectations from among employees from the with respect to the ESOP, are going to be much more successful. This is one where, hey, the value of the stock might go up, it might go down. The company has to service a lot of debt. Our distribution provisions aren't going to be so generous at the beginning. Well, and if there's just a constant communication that way, I think that helps out.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, Deb shared that we'll be restarting at 11:05. So at the bottom right of your screen, there should be a blue button that says Leave Room. If you press that, it should take you back to the main room, I hope. And thank you, Fenton. Great presentation.
Thank you, Rick. Thank.
Hello?
Hi, Sean. We're going to restart at about 11:05.